you, Mr Pritchard, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. And I would like to thank my honourable friend, the member for Birmingham Erdington, for securing this hugely important debate, which is an existential matter for many of our constituents and millions around the globe. Can I also thank my friend, the Right Honourable Member for Strangford, who cares about our role in the world and speaks up for the most marginalised at home and abroad, and the Honourable Member for Glasgow North for his contribution making the link between food insecurity at home and abroad, and my friend the Honourable Member for Coventry North West making a powerful case on the impact of aid cuts and the decimation of DFID. At a time of converging global crisis, I look forward to working with the new Minister, who is not in his place, in the interests of the world's poorest and most marginalised and the British people, who expect us to play a leading role in building a fairer, safer world in our national interest. Mr Chairman, global food security is national security. The UK imports almost half of the food it consumes, exposing us to fluctuations in global prices. In the year to September, food and non-alcohol beverage prices rose nearly 15%, the highest rate in 40 years. And for many basics, this is even higher. And for our poorest constituents, the impact stings all the worse, as more of their disposable income is siphoned away on the essentials. At this point, we can all cite shocking tales from our constituency mailbag. I spoke to a head teacher in my constituency recently who told me they have children turning up to school a nervous wreck, having seen their parents skipping meals, unable to concentrate, often hungry themselves. One boy she spoke of was so hungry that they caught him trying to eat a pot of PVA glue. This is a national crisis, but an international one too, which we have as much of an interest in solving. Globally, food prices have soared over the past year. Despite dropping over summer with harvests rolling in, the Food and Agriculture Organisation shows that prices remain high and remain 8% above the same levels last year. Global wheat prices remain 10.6% above values in August last year, and according to the World Food Programme, 345 million people are experiencing acute food insecurity. The causes are multifaceted, but the consequences are invariably stark, as many honourable members have highlighted today. Putin's barbaric war of aggression on Ukraine has poured fuel on the inflation fire. The Russian block of grain exports from Ukraine earlier this year has contributed to an international humanitarian crisis, and across the House, we are united in standing up for Ukraine in the face of Russian aggression, and we welcome the UN-backed Black Sea grain agreement between the Ukraine, Russia and Turkey, which has been essential to get shipments out of Ukraine and combat the rising food prices. The UK has got to put its diplomatic weight behind extending this agreement beyond November, and Russia must continue to meet its commitment under the agreement in full. And I hope that the Minister will continue to provide support to the EU Solidarity Lanes programme, which is helping to ship millions of tonnes of grain from Ukraine via land and river borders each month. But let's be clear, Ukraine is only one factor in the global hunger crisis. Even before Russia's invasion, food, fuel and fertiliser prices were rising, and 70% of those acute levels of food insecurity in 2021 were in conflict-affected countries. Ukraine-related food price spikes are only the latest evidence that the global agricultural system is broken. It reiterates the global need to diversify our food sources and support developing countries with a bottom-up approach to food security. Households' right to food is put under increased pressure when they experience extreme events out of their control. And the hungry have very few choices. They can migrate in search of food, they can take food from others by force, or die of starvation. The question for us is, how do we work with partners to stabilise and build resilient local food environments? Mr Chairman, rising global food prices is being felt by people from Newgall to Northfield. Like the pandemic before, it is a reminder that, island though we are, the greatest challenges facing the world also roll back to our shores. In these difficult times, it is a cause for solidarity and international cooperation between allies and nations. It is a call which, in times past, Britain has proudly answered. As many colleagues have raised today, the suffering across the world right now is enormous. On our side of the House, we have been ringing the alarm about the hunger crisis for the best part of a year, from Afghanistan to Yemen to sub-Saharan Africa, conflict, inflation and accelerating climate change, creating a perfect storm. In June, the World Food Programme warned that the number of people at risk of succumbing to famine or famine-like conditions could rise to 323 million this year. I know that the former minister travelled to East Africa last week, so she will have seen the human consequence of this crisis firsthand. It is a shame that she cannot now turn that into action. Extreme hunger is driving mass displacement, conflict, and putting hundreds of thousands of lives at risk. And according to Oxfam, over 13 million people across Ethiopia, Kenya and Somalia were displaced in search of water and pasture in just the first quarter of 2022. And the UN has warned that 350,000 children could die by the end of the summer in Somalia alone. After the catastrophic famine of 2011, which killed 260,000 people, half of them children, the UK and the international community vowed never again. The UK learned lessons with a much stronger response to the famine of 2017 and succeeded in saving thousands upon thousands of lives. Yet despite this new crisis outstripping that of the one 5 and 11 years ago, the UK's response this year has paled in comparison. In the words of the World Food Programme Director David Beasley, it has put aid workers in the unimaginable position of having to take food from the mouths of the hungry to give to the starving. At a time when we need to be fortifying our alliances and building international cooperation, the UK under this government has gone missing. Successive cuts to overseas aid and the chaotic block on spending this summer, just weeks after the FCDO budget was signed off, has left the UK isolated. Repurposing aid away from poverty has not gone amiss too. In June, Samantha Power, the US aid chief, expressed disbelief at this government's decision to strip back support from East Africa. She said, "At the time of this arguably unprecedented food crisis, you are actually seeing a lot of key donors scaling back, if you can believe it. Assistance in places like sub-Saharan Africa, and that comes on the heels of the UK government making significant cuts." Last week, Abdirahman Abdishakur Warsame, the presidential envoy for Somalia's drought response, made these chastening remarks. In the 2017 drought, the UK and its leadership was vital. Its advocacy and energy was great, and it encouraged people like me to match the commitment. Britain was a great ally to Somalia, but that is all gone. The UK is still an ally, and they help with security, but when it comes to humanitarian response, they are not there, not in leadership or in aid. It's all gone. They are right to speak out because the situation is so grave. 700,000 people are now on the brink of famine in East Africa. Many million more are suffering from acute malnutrition. So let me be as clear as I can. When I say famine, I mean mass death. Under the Integrated Food Security Phase Classification System, that means 2 in every 10,000 adults or 4 in every 10,000 children dying every single day. Oxfam has warned that across the region, someone is now dying of hunger every 36 seconds. And by the time this debate finishes, that is 150 people more. The urgency of this crisis could barely be more stark. Yet earlier this month, when the minister in the other place was asked how much of the 156 million allocated to this crisis had been dispersed to date, he said less than half had been allocated. Half. Let me impress to the minister, when 260,000 people died in the famine of 2011, over half died before the official declaration of famine was made. So what are we waiting for? We cannot await until a formal announcement to act. Mr. Chairman, on the steps of Downing Street, our new Prime Minister tried to claim the mandate of the 2019 general election and recommitted to delivering on that manifesto. In the context of this debate, let me remind the Minister what that manifesto said. Building on this government's existing efforts, we will end the preventable deaths of mothers, newborn babies and children by 2030. Given that malnutrition plays a role in 45% of all under 5 deaths, and that in a food crisis we know that it is women and girls who eat less and eat last, you would expect food security to be a top priority of this Conservative government. So why then was food mentioned only 3 times in the government's 10-year international development strategy? Why did ministers turn up empty-handed to the Nutrition for Growth Summit in December and take 2 years to renew its pledge? And why last year did an estimated 11.7 million children, girls and women lose out on nutrition support due to the cuts? Mr. Chairman, I want to end this debate with reference to the single greatest long-term challenge to global food security, and that is the climate emergency. This summer, droughts, floods and wildfires wreaked havoc in the UK, but of course across the world. In Pakistan, devastating floods left a third of the country underwater, a size equivalent to the United Kingdom, acres of rice fields lost. In India, extreme heat decimated crop yields in Punjab and Uttar Pradesh, leading to a domestic grain export ban. And in the Horn of Africa, we face an unprecedented 5th failed rainy season in a row. The IPC, IPCC has warned of the impact of global warming on food security, not only from the wanton destruction of extreme weather events, but as soil health progressively weakens, ecosystems collapse, pests and diseases become more common, and marine animal biomass depletes. This is not just a disaster for the world, it is a disaster for us in the United Kingdom. The Climate Change Committee has warned global warming could lead to a 20% rise in food prices by 2050. It is a reminder why international cooperation and development is essential to protect people at home and across the world. The truth is, the UK has a unique role to play, but under this government, we are falling woefully short. Our international development expertise, decimated with the destruction of DFID, is sorely missed. It's missed here and abroad. Our incredible research institutions and universities have an incredible role to play in unlocking long-term solutions to the global food security crisis, like developing drought-resistant crops. And in the crisis of years past, we stepped up as leaders on the world stage to galvanise action and cooperation on the challenges that we have in common, helping to develop the early warning system so we can act decisively before tragedy strikes. What happened to that ambition? So can the Minister tell us why his government continues to invest in fossil fuels overseas, why essential projects for adaptation and mitigation have been indefinitely paused this summer, and when will the UK finally deliver on the international climate finance it promised as host of COP26 last year? On this side of the House, we know where we stand. We cannot keep lurching from crisis to crisis. It is only long-term development that helps us turn the tide on the greatest global challenges we face and rebuild trust based on our shared values and common interests. Global crises demand global solutions. So I hope the new Minister will recognise that and will fight to return the UK to the global stage. Thank you.